All right, I'm going to go over some of the ways that we can help the lower back release if there is any sort of impingement or misalignment in the joints, particularly the two SI joints here. And we're going to get into the swing with the main swing low at the ribs, at the bottom of the ribs, because it's going to slide up behind the sternum, and that way we can drop the hips. And it's really important that the hips stay relaxed instead of pushing the pelvis forward. Drop your hip flexors and deepen in the hip flexors, and see if you can walk your feet to 10 and 2 like you're on a clock. Okay, and then from here, what we're going to do is use our arms to support the weight. And this way you can let your lower body drop and your upper body stay engaged. Then we're going to add some gentle twists. So I like to give a little bit of information so this makes sense. So the pelvis is a floating mechanism, and it rotates like this, back and forth. And most people are in linear movements, even when bending from side to side. We want to actually twist. And so what I do is, my hope is that the swing will help release the SI joint, any sort of nerve impingement, so that the pelvis can find its own symmetry and balance. That's why we use gravity, because it'll stretch us evenly. So we want to test out and see how one side compares to the other. So we're going to just see how far we can twist. Arms pressing in, forearms pressing in. Make a diamond with your arms, your hands above your head, and keep a nice strong engagement in the upper body so the lower body can be completely relaxed. So the idea is we're going to lengthen the spine out of the pelvis and create space in between the vertebrae. And everything is on a spiral. Everything is on a twist, but not just a linear twist like in one circle. It actually is a whole spiral that goes up to the crown of the head and down to the foot. So we want to create this diagonal while we twist. And when we do that, then the lower back has a chance of resetting and releasing any pressure or compression that's been happening in the joints. And sometimes this twist or torsion happens because one side of the body is stronger than the other. Most of us have a dominant side, or we have certain habits where we will overuse one side and not balance it out. A lot of sports are also asymmetrical. So I want you to just feel, can you twist to your right as much as you can twist to your left? And I'm up on my toes, and you can't see with the video, but I'm up on my toes, so when I twist, my knee can come down towards the mat. And that is what creates the diagonal. So a lot of times when I see people twisting on the floor, they're just pulling their knee straight over to the side, and that can actually create more compression and therefore sensation or stimulation of the nerve path. So this diagonal, the spiral energetics is what I call it, is really important. And we all have one side that's tighter than the other, and then what we notice is that the side that's tight, we stretch twice as much, and usually the side that's weaker is the one that's in pain. Not always, but that is commonly the case. So we're just going to take it really slow and easy and repetition. We don't push or force. We just let the body unwind and unfurl. So with the swing slides up to the armpits, what we want to do is press back, give it a little hop, get it back down to the lower ribs, and then come back in so you're right underneath your plumb line. The more that you can deepen in your hip flexors, the more the pelvis can rock. If the hips are tight when the pelvis is rocked forward or pressed under, then that means that the hip flexors are tight and the quad is tight, and we're going to stretch those as well. So we roll our pubic bone down and back to deepen in the hip flexors so our knees are in level with our hips. Keep your forearm pressed so that the swing doesn't ride up or pinch the underarms. And then keep your crown pulling towards the sky so your spine stays nice and long. We want to get this long pillar of energy from the tailbone to the crown of the head, and then rotate them, spin and spiral amongst that axis, along that axis. So most of the time people are looking down, and this is part of why the lower back and neck tend to collect tension and pain, is because of the misalignment. So we want to make sure that our head, our gaze is up. Sometimes when we're stretching, people like to look down at the ground, but you don't need to look down. You can just feel it. You can just feel the pillar and the spiral along and around the pillar. Cool. So after doing that for a little while, things will start to loosen up, and it's really about longevity. Do this for 5 minutes. And once you get warmed up and comfortable, then we can go into some leg stretches. So we have to stretch everything that's attached to the hips. So core activation is super important, as well as releasing the glutes and the piriformis, but we need to get into the quad and hip flexors. So what we're going to do is grab for just one leg loop, put that on. Just get your foot in there, karate chop it in. If it's really challenging to get the foot in there, there's a much easier way where we can actually come and sit in the swing. I do this with a lot of my clients that are like, I am not able to lift my leg yet. So if you sit in the swing, spread it out, then you can put the leg loop on. And once the leg loop is on, then you gather the swing behind your back and lift yourself up to stand, and make sure that it's positioned right behind the sternum again. So one way or another, get your leg loop on. From there, we're just going to rock. So I call it wagging the tail, where you let your foot explore in the space, and you're letting the femur that connects into the hip socket, you're letting that move from side to side. So a lot of the linear movements don't actually heal the back. We have to get into the spin and the spirals. That's the main, primary focus of my work. The main priority is to work with the spirals. So not just side to side with the toes pointing up, we want to actually rotate the toes in and out, so the toes can point like windshield wipers forward and back. And when we rotate the foot while it's flexed in and out, I'm sure you can see what I'm doing. I'm doing this with my foot. Then the femur starts to move in the hip socket in a new way. So we're internally and externally rotating the leg, and at the same time having it suspended and therefore lengthening out, stretching the IT band and the hamstring, and then we're going to get into the hip flexor and quad next. So just this gentle movement of rocking, and we do both legs, because even though one side might be in pain, the other side is probably tight and throwing off the symmetry. So we're trying to find the balance in the pelvis, which again, like I said, just floats. It's a floating mechanism that twists, and a lot of times it'll get jammed, either twisted forward and back, but then up and down as well. And this is what I've noticed, is that there will be a torque, one hip forward, one hip back, but then it's also tilted where it's up and not actually level. So there's two different twists that can happen there. And that's why the nerve gets pinched, kind of like a hinge on a door where it's not tracking properly. It'll hit the top or bottom edge if it's not perfectly aligned. So that's how we can think of it with the hip joints. So after we rotate forward and back, we can do this for 5 minutes, just nice and easy. And you can notice that if you bring the foot forward, it's different than if you're stretching it out to the side, and you can play with that. Most people have too much external rotation and not enough internal rotation. So if you can, emphasize the internal rotation, pointing the toes towards the video, and just see if you can start to balance the internal and external rotation of the way that the femur is tracking in the hip socket. That changes the whole positioning of the pelvis and hips. Super important. And then we're going to bend the knee and bring it in, and if it's okay, give it a little hop. If you need to bring it down, grab the foot. You can grab the foot or the leg loop, and this is going to be an external rotation. Keep the foot flexed so the knee's happy, and just start to press. So we're doing a little butterfly wing, I call it, a pulse or a flutter here. So press the knee down. And after you press the knee down for a few rounds, see what it feels like in the hip joint. This is also going to stretch the TFL and the piriformis in the back. Once that feels warmed up, we do this in a very specific order. Then we're going to hold on to both leg loops, See if you can come to stand and turn your knee over for internal rotation, and now start to stretch the quad. This is tight on everybody, just FYI. Even though I do this every single day, I can still feel the stretch here. So we pull our knee in towards the center line and then let it spread out. But keep your gaze up and keep your chest lifted. Instead of curling in, lengthen. You want to keep the long line of the pillar and the axes along the spine. So most of the time when we go to stretch the hip flexors, people just lean forward, and then you're not getting a stretch. You pull your upper body in alignment with your tailbone, pressing the knee down, and then letting the heel come towards your glute. It's okay if it's all the way out there, but see if you can pull it in and then spread out, stretch back. And we just pulse. We inhale, bicep curl, and then exhale, relax and release. Inhale, lift. And we just do this for 5 minutes, each pose for 5 minutes. Just keep going because it will soften. The body is much more malleable than we think. It gets very stiff and dry, and I call it fluid dynamics when we're hydrating the tissue and releasing the soft tissue slowly, kind of like when the sponge on the side of your sink hasn't been used for a while, it's all dry and hardened. Our muscles get like that, our connective tissue, the whole interface of the fascia, the living matrix that is the sheath over the body is communicating, and usually that is what is tight and suffocating the muscles from getting more nutrients, blood and oxygen flow. So we have to work that out like pizza dough, nice and easy. And then once we warm it up and get it hydrated, then it's supple again. So the whole body is very adaptive in that way. So just keep that in mind in terms of when it gets to be too much, you just stand up, point your toes towards the sky, and let that leg loop come off. And then we'll do the same thing, either sit in the swing as I showed you and get the leg loop on, or let's go ahead and go to second side. And this will basically be it for now. I mean, we have all these different core activations that we can do here because we need to lengthen and strengthen the core. So we create the space in between the vertebrae, and then we strengthen the muscles around that space. So it acts like a scaffolding to keep the spine nice and supple, like blowing up air in a tire. We want to keep that space in between the vertebrae, and then that helps from any further impingements or compression that could create pain. So all kinds of core exercises we can do from here, but let's work on the rotation, because sometimes it's too painful to even lift our leg. And if that's the case, then take it really easy. You can do this on the floor. You can lower the swing so your bum is actually on the floor and get as much support as possible. I like to do the suspended somatics over a really cushed out massage table, and that feels really good, so that you don't have to hold up all your weight, because sometimes this is a little much for people. But just see if you can practice not only side to side, but the windshield wiper, spinning the toes forward and back, noticing that the external rotation is always more pronounced, and work the internal rotation. Foot flex will keep the knee happy. And just back and forth, back and forth. Isolate the femur rotating in the hip socket. And you can see that it's going to really affect the position of the pelvis. And I like to make sure I'm pushing the hips down. Most people are like this when they're in the swing, really deep and in the hip flexors. So you can isolate this joint, and then that'll help release the glutes and piriformis as well. So 5 minutes if you can on this side, and then bend the knee. Once you bend the knee, give it a little hop. Make sure that you can reach around. If only one hand reaches around comfortably, that's okay. We always hug the swing. I like really pulling in and using that extra tension to flex the foot, flutter, which means I'm pushing the knee down gently and then letting it lift, not forcing. If we try and force a joint open, everything around it contracts. So this fluttering, or I call it the butterfly wing, is just really gentle, up and down. Maybe you only go like a little bit. Wherever you are is fine, it will open up. And then if you get a little bit more loosened up and flexible, you can actually push the knee down and work the knee towards the ground to get a deeper stretch in the side body. The piriformis and TFL are usually shortened on the side that is injured, and that is what's causing the pain. So I do a lot of tractioning and pressing just to create space here, but your upper body has to stay lifted. So you let this dynamic tension happen where upper body's lifting, lower body is dropping, and then we get all this wonderful space around the waist and the hub of the lower pelvis. Okay, so after doing that for a few minutes, try to 5 minutes each time. I'm just kind of going a little faster now, even though I love it. I do this every day. Then we hold on. Make sure you hold on because these allow you to be stable. Keep the foot flexed, bend the knee in, and then come to stand. Hop yourself up. So sometimes this is a little much to go into the quad stretch, so you can stay standing and just push back just a little. If you feel comfortable dropping all the way in, that would be better. Bending both knees, keeping the foot flexed, and then upper body lifts. Okay, so it's very common to drop the gaze and drop the chest. I want you to lengthen through the front of the spine. Most of the congestion is in the front of the spine, and that's why we really need to keep this length and lift through the belly, as well as strengthen the core so we have that scaffolding around the spine and there's no collapse. So this is opening up the quad and the hip flexor all the way into the psoas. These are all big major players for back pain. And then once you've done this for 5 minutes, if you can, and it starts to loosen up a little bit more, I do bicep curls in between, so I'm still strengthening the upper body and making sure I'm keeping my alignment. Drop in as far as you can. Don't go too far. You will feel things loosen up, but typically it's the front of the leg into the hip flexor that is causing the back pain. The tightness and shortness through those muscles is pulling on the back. And then we're gonna come to stand. Go ahead and lift the foot. And we're gonna end with an inversion. If you feel confident enough to go upside down, I'm gonna go ahead and hang in this direction. Push the swing all the way down to the hips. We want to position it with our forearms right across the iliac crest. From there, you're going to lean back, hold on, and wrap the legs outside in. Once we're outside in, then you're able to release your hands because it's tracking and tracing the shape of the pelvis. So we're using gravity to pull the spine, traction the spine out of the pelvis and create space for the vertebrae, which is incredible for the lower back. If it's too high, it'll just pinch your love handles, and that's no fun. So make sure it's right above the glutes and below the love handles in that little sweet spot at the top of the sacrum. And then from here, if it feels good, I like to interlace the fingers around the skull and gently pull down and traction down. Maybe do the same twisting of the gaze from side to side, or you can actually let the twist go all the way up through the pelvis. You can use your hands on the ground to push and pull as well, if that feels good. Stay here for 3 to 5 minutes if you can. If you need to come up, it's no problem to come up. You're just gonna do this for a minute. Reach up, grab for the swing, legs go wide and around, and then nice and easy, scissor kick down. Let the swing be right behind the sternum, and then take a moment to reset, keeping your pillar and rocking back and forth. So yeah, do that for a few rounds and see how it feels. I have like a whole series that we do for the lower back, and if there is any other way that I can help, please let me know. I have a ton of videos online on YouTube and on my website that you can also explore. Check out the ones that are for hips and lower back and enjoy. Thank you so much. Aloha.